Tonight, you open your fridge. You see the usual fish, salmon, tuna, maybe cod, maybe one or two more familiar names. It feels like choice. It feels like variety, but it is not. Right now, the ocean holds more than 20,000 known fish species, more than 20,000 living possibilities. And in your whole life, you have probably tasted only a few, maybe 5, maybe 6. So why does this happen? Why do we eat the same fish again and again? Most people think the others taste bad, or they look too strange, or nobody wants them. But that is only part of the truth. The real answer is stranger and much darker. Some of the answer is inside the fish. Some is inside the seafood industry, and some is inside your own brain. Stay till the end. The last part will completely change how you think about this. By the end, you will understand something strange. Your seafood choice may not be fully yours. You are seeing a tiny version of the ocean. It has been filtered by poison, machines, money, memory, disgust, and survival. Once you see that, a seafood counter will never look the same again. So let's start with the obvious question. If the ocean has so many fish, why don't we eat more of them? The first answer is chemistry. Some fish are dangerous, but they do not always make the poison themselves. The poison begins somewhere smaller. It enters the food chain quietly, then it moves upward. Think about barracuda, or certain reef fish in warm tropical waters. These fish eat smaller fish. Those smaller fish eat algae. Some of that algae carries a toxin called ciguatoxin. At first the amount is tiny. Then a small fish eats the algae. A bigger fish eats many small fish. Then an even bigger fish eats those fish. Step by step, the toxin climbs the food chain, and with every step, it can build up. This is called biomagnification. It means higher predators can carry more concentrated toxins. So a large reef fish can look perfect. It can smell fine. It can seem healthy. But hidden in its flesh, it may carry something invisible. Japanese researcher Takeshi Yasumoto studied this problem for years. In the 1970s and 1980s, he traced this toxin through reef ecosystems. What he found was deeply unsettling. Cooking does not remove it. Freezing does not remove it. You can grill the fish, you can boil it, you can fry it. The fish can look completely safe, but the toxin can still survive. Now imagine a fisherman long ago. He lives on a Pacific island. He catches a large reef fish. It looks strong. It looks clean. It looks like a gift from the sea. That night, his family eats it. At first, everything seems normal. Then morning comes. Something is wrong. Their mouths feel numb. Their bodies react in terrifying ways. Hot water may feel cold. Cold water may feel like fire. Their senses become confused. Their warning system turns upside down. For some victims, these strange feelings can last for months. Long before scientists named the toxin, island communities learned through pain. They learned which reef fish to avoid. Not from a label, not from a study, from sickness, fear, memory, and survival. One meal could become a warning for generations. Just like that, a whole category of fish disappears from the human plate. Most people never even know it existed, but poison is only one part of the story. The ocean is not just full of toxic fish. It is also full of fish that are edible, but unpleasant to our senses. To understand that, we have to go deeper. Far below the surface, sunlight disappears. The pressure becomes intense. The environment becomes harsh. Down there, life evolves strange tricks to survive. Sharks, rays, and many deep-sea fish hold high levels of urea. This helps them balance pressure and salt. For the fish, this is useful. For your dinner plate, it is a problem. That same chemical can make the meat smell like ammonia. It can smell sharp, harsh, almost like a cleaning product. Some of these fish are not poisonous. They may not harm you like a toxin would, but if they are not handled properly, they can become almost impossible to enjoy. Sometimes, within hours of being caught, your brain notices that smell instantly. It does not calmly think, this is a deep sea adaptation. It says one thing, danger. That smell reminds us of decay. It reminds us of something rotten, something unsafe, something that could make us sick. So before the fish reaches your mouth, your body has already rejected it. This is not a thoughtful food review. It is an ancient survival reaction. And appearance makes it even worse. Take the oarfish. It is massive, ribbon-like, almost unreal. Sometimes it washes ashore. And people do not see dinner. They see a sign, a warning, an omen. In parts of Japan, fishermen called it the messenger from the sea god's palace. That is not a name that makes people reach for a frying pan. So for some fish, the barrier is not only smell, it is meaning, appearance, fear. It is the feeling that this creature belongs to another world. A strange smell, a frightening shape, a mythical reputation. Put them together, and deep-sea fish stay off dinner tables for centuries. But even that still does not explain everything. Because many fish are safe. Many do not carry dangerous toxins. Many do not smell like ammonia. Many do not look like creatures from a myth. And still, we do not eat them. So what is really going on? Here is the uncomfortable part. Much of what lands on your plate was never truly chosen by you. It was chosen for you, decades ago, by an industry. In the middle of the 1900s, commercial fishing fleets built huge supply chains, but they built them around only a few species. Cod, tuna, salmon, herring. These names still sound normal to us today. But they did not become famous because humans tested every fish. They became dominant because they were convenient. They moved in large, predictable groups. That made them easier to catch. They could travel from ocean to processing plant without falling apart. Their bodies were easy to cut, easy to package, easy to sell. Their bones, size, and flesh worked well for a fast filleting. In other words, they fit the machine. There was another cold reason too. Early refrigeration and freezing technology was expensive and limited. Companies needed fish that could be caught in bulk, frozen in bulk, shipped in bulk, sold in bulk. The ideal fish was not just tasty, it was predictable. One shape, one size, one process. If a fish was slippery, odd-shaped, low yield, or scattered in small numbers, it was not worth the cost. So slowly, something strange happened. The machinery began deciding the menu, not the ocean, not the full range of life beneath the waves. The machinery. Fish that lived alone were ignored. Fish that moved unpredictably were ignored. Fish that appeared in small numbers were ignored. Some may have been edible. Some may have been interesting. Some may have belonged to local food traditions,